Hello and welcome to the EV Cafe Takeaway, a podcast. It's focused on that zero emission future that we all hope for. And every week I get joined by one of the ugly mugs from the old EV Cafe. And this week I'm blessed with John. Hello, John.
Hello, darling. And thank you for being so kind. That's the nicest thing anybody said to me all day.
And it's about the bit as good as it can get. It's what they call harsh but fair. Anyway, moving along, because it's all about the guests here on the EV Cafe podcast, of course. And we get joined by innovators, pioneers and collaborators. And do you know what? This guy is a true innovator because he was one of the very first podcasts that we have ever listened to for EV stuff, and it's Gary Comerford, author of EV Musings. Amazing.
Hello. Hi. What a fantastic introduction. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you. Happy to be here, gentlemen.
So I've taken a leaf out of your book, Gary, and tried a bit of ad-libbing. I know that you're a bit of an actor as well on the quiet. But Gary, tell me, where did EV Musings come from as a sort of concept? Because clearly podcasts are a brilliant idea. And what is your mission within that podcast? Because you're slightly different than us. Edgier, a bit more, what's that bloke that used to do Question Time? Well, yeah, that true. Tell us all about it, Gary.
Basically, way back in the mist of time, I used to blog, and I had a blog called the Musings Cafe. How's that for serendipity?
Oh.
And I blog about all sorts of nothing, basically. And then in 2018, I got my first electric vehicle, which, as listeners to the podcast will know, was a 30 kilowatt hour Kia Soul. And I did all my research, and I borrowed one from the Electric Vehicle Experience Centre in Milton Keynes. I thought, yep, this is the one for me. And then I got it home, and I went out and did some public charging. And the first thing that you run up against is CCS, CHAdeMO, DC, AC. What's all this about? So I realised that I had a whole load of questions about the whole sphere of electric vehicles and how they work. And then, took a couple of days to filter through, but a little voice inside the back of my head said, well, if you've got these questions, other people are going to have these questions. So how can we solve that? And I thought, well, why not try a podcast? So I put together a podcast. I thought, well, what am I going to call it? Well, it's got to be EV, obviously. And then I harked back to the blog I did back at the turn of the century. And I thought, Musings, there we go, EV Musings. And that's how it came about. So I started off, and I think the first 10 or 15 episodes, I had a co-founder, Simon Rowe. And then at some point he turned around and he said, love what you're doing, Gary. Not want to do it anymore. I want to go off and he's very much into electric unicycles and personal electric vehicles.
Right,
so he's got a whole YouTube channel on that, which is great if you like to see people falling off electric things, which is quite amusing in and of itself. So I carried on by myself, and I'm up to 240 odd episodes at the moment. And the whole kind of ethos behind it is education. And it comes down to two particular parts. There's educating new people who are new to the electric vehicle scene, and people who are thinking about getting into electric vehicles. And then the other side, and I'm sure you can sort of align with this, is educating people about the misinformation that's out there. And I've had Quentin Wilson on a couple of times talking about, the work that he's doing. I've had the folks from Fully Charged on talking about the work that they're doing. So, between those two aspects, education and sorting out the misinformation is keeping me quite busy.
It's good. It's interesting that it's a shame about the EV Experience Centre in Milton Keynes biting the dust, because we, John, you will recall,
I do.
The very first time we got together as a team live to do one of our webinars was in a locked shut or sort of semi-shut, wasn't it? Because we had the door halfway down or something. And it was just as lockdown was breaking up, and we were. It was the first time we were allowed out. We had a donut eating contest on live, which was just silliness. But it was. I mean, it was a really important feature, I thought, of the Milton Keynes Centre, and I think it shows that people. Or it showed that people really needed that information. It's really good. One of the things that I've seen, Gary, and John, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Gary's got a bit of a reputation for being a bit of a tough nut. Like he won't let people get off the hook.
Yeah, so I've had the joy of being on Gary's wonderful podcast, and it is a bit of a, not a grilling, I think that's too strong, but certainly you're made to bring your A game.
Yeah. But I think that's good. Is that something you try to do, Gary?
One of the things, if Liz Allen's listening to this, she'll know, and Kate Tyrrell, the one phrase I like to say a lot is, let me play devil's advocate on this. And I like to put in the questions that maybe people don't really want to answer. But when you're looking at misinformation and when you're looking at education, those are probably the questions that you should answer. And sometimes I'll ask a question, somebody will kind of go, no. But I find that more often than not, if I ask it, I tend to phrase my questions in the manner of, talk to me a little bit about X, Y, and Z. And I think people accept that a little bit better than me going, you said this is wrong, tell me why you're right. And I think I get over the hump with that.
You do, and Gary, I'm fascinated to understand what goes on in your head, because you think
so
differently.
Is his doctor.
You do think differently in that for many people who get an EV, they go out, they discover, AC, DC, CHAdeMO, CCS. They learn the lessons and they just get on with it. You had a mission which you went on to help inform people. Where does that come from? That need to help people understand?
To be honest, I've no idea. As you've sort of hinted, I do a little bit of acting in the background. So the whole aspect
Stop right there. Stop right bloody there. Okay, my friend, let's go to IMDb and have a little look at what you've been up to. Warhorse.
Yeah.
Different perspectives. You were a janitor. Yeah. Ginger and Rosa, CND protester. This one blew me away. You were in Rush. The Nicky Lauder and James Hunt thing. You were a commentator. Thor, The Dark World. You've been in The Crown. And occasionally, and I didn't know this about you until I absolutely loved you, and then you told me, occasionally you'll say, oh yeah, I do a little bit of acting. Seriously, man, you are so humble it's untrue.
But we do need to let him answer the question that he just got asked, because that's really important, and then we can bully him about acting.
Right, come on then. So why do you need to inform people?
Not that we care now, because we want to talk about your acting.
We'll get around to the acting. He's not that impressive, believe me. It's more a case of...
For those of you not watching, you need to watch how Gary's face was at that particular moment, because everything about his face said it was quite important.
Well, it's important to me. It's how I make a lot of my money, so... Good. But, to everybody else, I'm just, someone in the background on a film set. But, we'll talk about that in a second. I'll tell you about my days on Rush and working with Ron Howard and people like that if you want. I've got a million stories, and I'm happy to talk about that. But getting back to, why do I feel the need to educate? I don't necessarily feel the need to educate, but it's a performance. When I'm on a podcast, it's a performance. It's me putting myself out there. It's something that I can manage, it's something I can write, and it's something I can control. And when you're an actor, that's not something that a lot of actors can do. Well, let me rephrase that. Anybody can write and perform whatever they want, but to actually get that out to people, and at the moment I say I'm heading up to 200,000 downloads. So there's quite a lot of people have actually listened to primarily my guests, but also me. so the fact that I can do something like that, the fact that I can go out and present something and can do a performance of whatever sort to somebody and educate them at the same time. Plus, as I said right at the beginning, if I've got all these questions about what's the difference between CCS and CHAdeMO and why is it my CCS thing doesn't fit? Oh, it's because there's a little rubber bung at the bottom that you've got to pull out to expose the high voltage pins. There's going to be a load of other people who are hitting the same sort of questions and the same sort of issues. So if I can help them and allow me to be a little bit expressive and put out some sort of thing that I have control of, it's a win-win, really.
You interestingly call it a performance, Gary, and one of the things which strikes me is how authentic you are, and actually it probably isn't a performance. The person that I meet and see at events around the country and have spoken to many times is genuine. You are the person that we get to see, know and love. Is it really a performance?
It's a performance in as much as I am standing up and I'm putting myself out there for an audience. It doesn't necessarily mean it's an acting performance. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm playing a character, as I may do on when I've got a film crew around me and Colin Firth and people like that standing next to me.
How many mics have you got there to drop? I mean, this is like boom, boom, boom. Anyway.
I've got names I could drop left, right, and centre. But
it's so unlike you. You don't, do you? I mean, genuinely, you do keep this in a little box in the corner that you just go and do.
Yeah, it's because I compartmentalise. There is the part of me that is the EV person, and I work in the EV sphere, and I get to speak to people like yourselves, and I do the podcast. And then there's the other part of me, which is the thespian, the actor, enunciate to the back row and that sort of stuff. And that's a completely different part of me, and it needs, I do that at different times. I do that in different places, and it exercises different parts of me as an individual. So I tend not to sort of mix the two or merge them, although this is like the crossing of the streams at the moment.
Crossing of the streams. What a delightful way to put it. I mean, Gary, listen, I've got no names to drop. I have been on the West End stage. I will say that. That's about with Richard Bryars and Nanette Newman. So that's about as good as it gets for me. So that was West End stage. The Shaw Theatre, which is in King's Cross, which is just about classed as the West End stage. And I did a Shakespeare workshop at the Jeanette Cochrane Theatre in Holborn. Sort of just about counts as well, but anyway, that was my. And I had a director that taught me to enunciate my words in a particular way, which I shall tell you off air. I won't tell you on air because it was rather rude. But what got you into acting in the first place? I mean, I was the rogue, right? I was the kid that was just naughty and. They threw me into the drama class to kind of get me out of the way and do that. I can't believe that you had that same baptism into acting and things like that. How did that come about?
I first went on stage, as most people did, aged about 7 in the nativity play.
Yes, did that, yeah.
Yeah, and we're talking quite a few years ago, and I was given a monologue to learn, which was just names. And I learned it, and I went up and I performed it flawlessly, I might add. And I never did anything else for many, many, many years after that. And I moved around the world, lived in different places, had different jobs. And when I came to the place that I am now, I joined the local amateur dramatics organisation because there were people that I know that were part of that. I got a couple of roles. And then at some point, we got an email from a local company. They said, we're filming a production, and we're looking for people to be mechanics in the pit lane of the Monte Carlo Grand Prix in 1923 for a Hollywood film. And I thought,
I remember that first time round.
So I applied and I got the role, and they said, right, fantastic. So you're in. we'll be filming on Tuesday. And I said, oh, great. When do I fly out? And they went, what? I said, when do I fly out? Monte Carlo. They said, no. We're not filming in Monte Carlo. I said, where are we filming? They said, a barn in Reading. Oh, okay. So that was my introduction to working on films. And I turn up and they put me in this fantastic original 1920s overalls in pure white. And I walk on set and I look down and there's a young blonde girl sat next to me. And I thought, I recognise her. It was Jessica Biel. And that was my first day on set. Yes. Now married to Justin Timberlake, that Jessica Biel. Yeah. And then Ben Barnes was there and Colin Firth was there and Kristen Scott Thomas was there. And it's kind of, this is quite interesting. And then on came the director, Michael Caton Jones, who you may know, he did a film called Doc Hollywood with Michael J. Fox. The first thing he said is, that overall that you're wearing is way too bright. You need to dirty it up. Roll in the dirt. This is an original 1920s thing, and he's having me roll in the dirt. So that was my introduction to it.
Fantastic.
Gary, I want to know, just us, okay?
Yeah.
Whose phone number in your little black book is the one you are proudest to have?
I know, I've got to be honest here, I don't have anybody's phone number like that. But I can get the phone number for Olivia Colman, who's lovely. I've worked with her a couple of times. Obviously, she was on The Crown. She was the queen to the seasons, and she's an absolutely lovely person. You'll hear a lot of stories about her, about how nice she is, and she is absolutely fantastic.
Okay. Well, having avoided that particular question, let's pick up something else you spoke about, which was, you said, I've been around the world a lot and I've had a few jobs. Sorry, that was really bad.
Yes, terrible.
Started out in Keighley, Yorkshire.
Yes.
And then off you went. Tell us about your journeys around the world and what sort of jobs you've had.
As the saying goes, I was born at a very early age. In bed. My parents obviously lived in Keighley, which was where they filmed The Railway Children, or Oakworth, actually. And I met a lot of the people. I met Jenny Agutter. I mean, I was 5 when that came out, something like that. I met Jenny Agutter. And then, of course, all the tourists started coming because of The Railway Children. And my parents thought, no, we don't like this tourism. So they moved to a place called Home Firth. Which is where they filmed Last of the Summer Wine.
Everything's about a film for you, isn't it? They filmed this here and they filmed that there. And
It's completely bizarre, isn't it? So, I grew up there. I went to university locally. And then when I left university, obviously this was the late 80s. There were no jobs there. So I had to come down to London. I came down and I started working in the City of London on the phone all day to stockbrokers, getting prices for stocks and shares to put them into this fantastic computer system so that they could evaluate all the portfolios and things like that. And it was great because it was the 80s. It was the the Filofaxes and the red braces and the Porsches and all that. None of which I had because I was starting there on £8,000 a year. Living in London and trying to make ends meet. But the next sort of desk along was a group of programmers who were programming this system. And I kind of got talking to them because my education, my background education is computer programming, IT, that sort of thing. And I had a few questions and they said, well, if you want to get into this, have a word with this individual. So I had a word with this individual and I got a job working with a company that was basically creating and implementing an accounting package. Nominally across the UK, but then they started to branch out. So my first overseas trip was to Copenhagen by myself. I'll tell you how unprepared I was. I had to ring my mum and say, do you have my passport? She said yes. So I had to drive up to Leicester Forest East. She had to drive down to Leicester Forest East so she could hand over the passport so I could take the flight the following morning. But that then kind of... let's say spiral, but that snowballed and I ended up moving to one of two very large US multinationals that I worked with. And they were all implementing this particular software package that I ended up, for some reason, I'm not sure how, I ended up being one of the top 10 people outside the US with knowledge and experience of this specific package. So I'd go out, I would literally wake up on a Monday morning, go to the airport, fly to Frankfurt for a couple of days. On a Wednesday, I'd fly to Berlin a couple of days. Back on a Friday night. The following week, I'd be down to Paris. Week after that, Madrid. Week after that, Geneva. Week after that, Lisbon. And, you know, I mean, I've flown to Frankfurt 400 times.
Oh my gosh.
I know, it's really, I've got a huge carbon footprint, and there's no way I can ever offset it, which is interesting because, of course, we were having that discussion this morning about the Heathrow having the extra runway and all that, and it's kind of, you know, I mean, yes, people are going to have to travel, but when you can go from London to Prague for cheaper than you can go from London to Newcastle on the train, that's an issue.
Yeah.
Anyway, get off my soapbox about that. So yeah. Went from one pharmaceutical to company, one US multinational to another US multinational. And then about 2007, I thought, no, I don't really like working for other people. I like being a little bit independent. Because basically, at the heart of it, I'm lazy. I like to do what I want to do rather than what other people want to do. So I went out independently, did a bit of consultancy. And that kind of meshed in with the day on set with Jessica Biel and people like that. And it's been like that ever since.
So you still do the consulting as well?
I do consulting. There are a couple of people in the EV sphere that I'm working with at the moment. Okay. No names, no pack drill, as they say. But here's a interesting little thing. One of the companies that I used to, and you'll kind of, I'm not picking on you, John, for any particular reason, but you're very, very open about your autism, very, very open about mental health and that sort of thing. The company I used to work with were the company who created Prozac.
Right.
Okay. Antidepressant. They sold billions of dollars worth of this every year. I didn't know a single person who needed it because nobody was open. Nobody would talk about it. Until I spent some time in the US working with this company, and the number of people go, oh yeah, I'm on Prozac. And it was a lot more open there than it is now. And I think, I mean, you know, this is 1998, 99. I think the situation has changed a lot more. And you're a prime example of that. John, you're very, very open about mental health and that sort of thing. And it's something that's become a lot more obvious and open and apparent.
I think, though, there is a risk, and the risk is that statements by Donald Trump, where he is saying that diversity and inclusion cause tragedies to happen because we're using people who should not be performing a role to perform a role just because they carry this particular health diagnosis, will fundamentally change our world unless we push back hard. I am every bit as capable as anybody else of performing a role, but I've got some challenges, and Paul knows those challenges better than most. I drop him in the soup most days. But we find a way of being able to use the things I'm good at and to keep me away from the things that I'm less good at. And it's important that we challenge this narrative that somehow we are not capable and that we can't do a job for people and that we are trustworthy and reliable and all that stuff. So thank you for raising that. It's important that we keep talking about it. And anybody who fears judgment based on who they are and what they are, frankly, I've got your back.
Now, the corollary to that, following on, is that this company also created a product called Cialis, which is basically a Viagra competitor.
Oh, have you got the number?
Well, ironically, it was one of those, again, they sold more of this Viagra competitor than they did Prozac. I've asked loads and loads of guys if they need it. Nobody I know needs it. How are they selling so much of it?
I don't need it. I just want it.
Yes, it's like a recreational drug now. Oh Oh dear. Well, but Gary, I think you've raised a really important point, and it's somewhere where we do like to sort of chat about the difficult things in life, because John has often shared about his difficult things in life, and one of them being me, and I've done that.
Lies.
One of mine being John, but. But on a serious note, we've been our journey, and we've had our challenging times, and we understand what that world looks like when we come out of it. What's a time when you've really kind of been up against it? You've felt like the world's crumbling around you. It's been really difficult. You talk to me about a time in your life it was really difficult, and you had to dig deep, and how you came through that.
It's interesting because as I sit and think about this, I mean, yeah, there've been ups and downs, but I don't think I've ever had that situation where, I've been sat there with my head in my hands thinking, oh my God, what the hell's happening here? I was involved in a fairly major car accident when I was living in London. And I ended up getting taken to court for that. It was not my fault. Some guy jumped the lights and ran into me, but because I was the 21-year-old in the Escort, the guy who hit me, who's a middle-aged man in a Mercedes, they sort of sided with him, and I ended up with a large number of points on my license as a result of that. In fact, strictly speaking, I had 12 points. They should have taken my license away, but they suspended 3 of the points, so I ended up still being able to drive. But that was one of those things where, right, I've ended up in hospital. I've got glass embedded in my head as a result of that. I've written off cars. I've got the company it was a company car. They wanted to know what happened. They're thinking that it's my fault. I've got a court case coming up. I've lost the court case. I've now got points on the license. That was kind of one of those things where I'm thinking, it could all go quite wrong very, very quickly. I'm not careful about this. But one of the things that I think I've got is quite a positive attitude. I'm not one of those who'll sit there and sort of wallow in self-pity. I might for 5 minutes, but I can always look at something and go, right, I can't change this. I can't change this. I can't change this. What I can do is I can focus on this, or I can look at that, or I can do this, or I can think about that. And it puts me in the mindset to sort of try and drag myself out of whatever pity there may have been.
I'm curious as to the sorts of things that because I mean, it's often the things that we're proudest of, or the things that came about after things. So as you are today, if you're faced with off days, let's call it an off day. A day is, what do you look at that you're really proud of, and that really kind of lifts your spirits and gives you the confidence to kick on?
It's interesting because, like everybody, I do have off days, but one of the reasons that I decided to go independent was I can wake up in the morning and I can look and I can say, today I'm going to sit and read a book all day. I don't have to go out there and record an episode of the podcast or write something on the podcast or do anything else, unless, of course, it might be a bit of work that I've got. If Colin rings up and goes, "Hi, Gary, it's Colin Firth here. Will you come in?" I'm obviously going to do that. Colin Firth doesn't ring me. He doesn't have my number. I don't have his, But I am in that situation where I can, to a greater or lesser extent, pick and choose what I want to do on any given day. So it helps me in that if I am feeling a little bit, I'm not into. I've had this, the cough that's been going around. I picked that up at home over Christmas, and there's been a couple of days on that where I've thought, really don't want to do anything today. And I've been able to do that. But then the other side of that is I could get to the day where I say, right, I'm not going to do anything today. But having said that, the new episode of the new season of the podcast is coming out in a couple of weeks. I need to make sure I've got some written. I need to make sure that I've got guests lined up. I need to make sure that I'm editing the episodes I've already done. So knowing that I've got something sort of discrete to do, I've got this episode of the podcast that needs to be edited. That's good for me. It's something discrete. It's something I know I can do in a given period of time, and I can get on and do it. What I don't like is the whole thing of, well, you've got this huge amorphous thing that needs to be done, and it could take a long time. And you see that doesn't work for me. I need to break it down into something into bite-sized chunks that I can deal with.
Oh, good. Bite-sized chunks. Perfect segue. So, you've talked to 240-ish experts in our world. What are the nuggets, those little pieces of information that you've picked up along the way that we can boil down into a consomme, a little something, a rich sauce that you can give us that gives a flavour of everything you have learned in those 240 episodes?
That's interesting. I've spoken to a lot of charge point operators. The likes of, I've had Sam Clark on, Ian Johnston.
Any good ones?
Ian Johnston was good. Don't edit that bit out. Yeah.
No, that's staying right in.
No. And the one thing that the one thing that's consistent about all those, I tend to ask all the charge point operators the same question, the same set of questions, so I can compare and contrast. And the one thing that I think I've picked up, which intuitively I knew, but I think it's worth repeating, is that the charge point operators don't like the fact that it's expensive to do public charging. They would like it to be a lot cheaper than it is. And none of them are making a profit on this, and none of them are price gouging. So, when I look on social media and I see people, oh, look, it's, 75 pence a kilowatt hour, 89 pence a kilowatt hour. They're making a fortune. I'm able to go on and say, no, that's not actually true. They want it to be as cheap as possible. And I don't know whether you heard the discussion that Ian Johnson had with Imogen from the Fully Charged. And he was talking about the standing charges, £90 a year up to £8,000 a year. How can they look at that and go, right, well, we're going to drop our prices down. It's just not going to happen. So I think that's one nugget that's come out. Yes, it's expensive, but they're not price gouging, and they want it. They want it to be as cheap as we want it to be. And I think the other thing that's come out is we've got a lot of work ahead of us to sort out the misinformation. As I said earlier, I've had Quentin on the show, and he's aware of the fact that there's a huge amount of money coming in from vested interests that's putting out some of this misinformation. And a lot of it is really simple to counter, but there's just so much of it. And if people start to hear the same thing over and over and over and over again, they start to believe it's true. And if you go onto any social media post that talks about electric vehicles and you read the comments, you will see the same things that come up every single time. And they're just not true, but they're now ingrained in the public psyche. And that's the bit that we need to be working towards solving. And I hope that's what I'm doing. I know you're making great efforts in doing that as well. But that's another little nugget. There's a lot of people pushing against what we're doing, and we need to keep pushing.
I wanted to follow up on that charging thing, because I totally respect the fact that you've taken the time to interview these guys, like Ian and the rest of the crew that have been trying to solve this problem of the challenge of charging. But we're aware, aren't we, that there are companies that are finding ways to not charge a fortune, and some companies that have never really charged a fortune. Why are they different? And what does that say about the ambition of the bigger companies that haven't been able to find a way, despite using some similar technologies like renewables and things like that?
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting because you and I know our good friends at AW Renewables. We've got that fantastic installation just outside Leighton Buzzard.
Leighton Buzzard, yeah.
Full Chem power charging, 350 kilowatts, 39 pence a kilowatt hour. And, people look at that and go, well, if they can do 39 pence a kilowatt hour, why can't BP Pulse do 39 pence a kilowatt hour? And the reason is because BP Pulse don't have a huge wind turbine literally sat next to the chargers. And whilst that makes the charging a lot cheaper, it's not scalable. Yes, there are a number of other sites where you could put wind turbines and chargers, but you're not going to be able to put that in as many places as, say, GridServe have done, or Osprey, or Instavolt. So that's kind of an outlier that's allowing them to reduce their prices overall. And then the other one that people always quote quite rightly is, well, Tesla. Yeah, Tesla can do it for, I mean, at one point they were down at high 20s, low 30s off peak a kilowatt hour, which is, you look at that and you think, well, they're subject to the same sort of constraints that all the other charge point operators are. Why can't everybody else do it at that price? And the analogy I always use on this is when I go to get my car serviced and I sit down and they come and say, would you like a coffee? I get a coffee for free. But when I go to Starbucks for the same coffee, it's £2.50, it's £3, it's £4. The reason being that Tesla are not a charging company. Tesla are an OEM that makes cars. They just do charging on the side. Same as when I go to my car servicing company. They're not a coffee company. They're a car servicing company. They don't have to make a profit on the coffee. They're making the profit elsewhere and offsetting the costs on that. Plus, there are different price points for their hardware. Because their hardware is a lot simpler, they can actually install 5, 10, 15 chargers a lot cheaper than if you're putting in Kempower or if you're putting in ABB or if you're putting in some of the circuit control stuff or the Alpatronic stuff. The cost of goods is a lot lower. So you put those two things together, they've got lower overheads and they don't actually have to make a profit. You can see why it's a lot easier for someone like Tesla to undercut everybody else in the market.
So why don't we go with the Tesla model then? Because it doesn't break down, doesn't get vandalized typically, seems to work all the time. It's very fast. I'm what's not to kind of love about that? Let's face it, we don't need we don't even get anything more than that from the aforementioned companies in many cases.
And if you look at, there's a company called EV on the Move, which is part of the EG group. So they're a group who own a large number of petrol stations, and they were the ones who bought the Tesla V4 hardware, and they've put that in at a number of sites. And I was at one over Christmas up in Wakefield, and even though they've got Tesla hardware, and even though they're actually using the Tesla app to start and stop the charges in the same way as you do if you're trying to use a Tesla app and you're not driving a Tesla vehicle, they're charging 64 pence kilowatt hour, I think. So they have undercut it. They haven't gone down as low as Tesla because they're not getting the subsidies from Tesla, or they're not offsetting the price against other aspects as Tesla are doing. But they've been able to bring the price down to a lower level than say the Big Ten.
I could go on with this conversation, but it's all about Gary. That's why we're here. But it was a very interesting interlude because I do kind of get the ump about the fact that everything is a bit more expensive than I perceive that it needs to be. But I do respect people like yourself that have really taken the time to research.
Let me ask you a question then, because I ask this question to a lot of people that I come across. Is public electric vehicle charging too expensive?
Is public vehicle charging too expensive?
That's the question. Yes or no?
If I'm given a yes or no choice, yes.
Okay. When was the last time you used something like the ZapMap price filter to find a cheaper charger when you were going to charge?
Never, exactly. So
is it too expensive, or are we buying things? Are we charging based on convenience rather than price?
We are totally doing that. We're charging on convenience rather than price, because public charging for the privileged like myself that has a charge point at my house are the exception, not the rule. What we are facing, particularly in the commercial vehicle world, I think, is charging locally rather than at home is vastly more expensive. So the businesses that are going first, like BT, like British Gas, Centrica, like the Royal Mail, although they don't do very much charging publicly, but many of the companies that are having to charge publicly are having to foot the bill to build it out, and I'm not sure that that's entirely fair. To build everything on the back of the big businesses. But anyway.
Sorry, before we close this, I've literally just come off a discussion with Vicky Edmonds, who's the new CEO of EVA England, and we were having exactly this kind of discussion. And I don't think anybody thinks that we can get price parity between home charging and public charging. It's never going to be, because you're comparing, a small 7 kilowatt charger with, a big Alpatronic 350 kilowatt charging. So the thing that I put to her is, I think people will be more accepting of expensive public charging when it drops below the price of diesel or petrol. What do we think about that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's around 50p, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're charging at home, you're way below that. So if your journey cycle allows you to charge at home, off street, and then go about your day, as it does for a huge number of EV drivers, happy days. Sure. Those are the low-hanging fruit, I guess. The difficult bit is that next section, those SMEs who are out and they're doing 200-300 miles, they're away from home, they need an EV to do a job for them, and retail charging, public charging becomes a very important cost for the business. And that's the point at which fleet managers say, can I make this work? And I think that's the challenge for us now. As there are people in our industry who say, cars, it's easy, it's done. I don't believe that for a second. I think we've got an awful lot of work to do. But the commercial space is even more complex and is even more price sensitive. Because it's not a convenience, it's a necessity to do the job rather than just, it would be nice to charge publicly or at home. It's an absolute requirement. It staggers me that CPOs don't offer some kind of business discount. If you're buying in bulk because you do so many miles, why wouldn't you get a discount? Don't understand that.
In fact, the opposite is true in some cases.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd like to see is, I would like to be able to go to a public charger and I would like to say, right, use the price that I pay for my home electricity as your baseline. Add whatever you need to on top to cover your costs and charge me that amount.
Oh, if only we knew somebody in IT who knew this marketplace and could make that happen. Now then, Mr. Comerford.
Yes.
It's the early part of 2025, and traditionally what businesses do at this time of year is say, what's my year going to look like? And we set vision and missions, and we check all this stuff and make sure that we're still on course, and then we start to develop new things. And I wonder, do you go through that process, and what does 2025 look like for you and your business?
As I said a short while back, I'm basically lazy. So sitting down and having to think through all this sort of stuff. I need a vision statement, and I need a mission statement, and I need a strategy. And he's got, oh my good grief. I tend to be quite reactive. I know I'm going to do 2 full seasons of the podcast. So there's going to be 40 episodes that go out. There's going to be about 6 weeks in between, 6 weeks at the start. So my next episode's going to go, my first episode of the next season is going to go out the 10th of February. My last episode of the following season is probably going to go out sometime mid-December. So those are my sort of signposts. Those are my flags that I'm aiming for. That's what I know I'm going to do. What's going to fit in around there? I don't know. I know I want to do the EV, the London to Brighton to wherever that's going to be rally. Maybe Holland. I don't know. You didn't hear that from me, but yeah. I'd love to get onto the EV rally itself, the European one that Colin announced a little while back. That will be fantastic. But obviously, as a lone individual, there are some barriers about doing that. So I'd like to be able to get in and speak to a couple of the teams that are doing that, see whether they might have a spare seat.
If only we knew anybody who does that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll have a word, see whether I find any. Plus, there's all of the conferences. I mean, I don't know whether you... These here are... Can we see this? These are some of the... yeah. I like to attend the odd conference. And there's quite a few. You talked earlier on today on the EV Cafe about the commercial vehicle show. Got my tickets for that. Everything Electric. They're doing a couple of shows this year. Would like to get down to those. Juice at the end of the year. maybe the EV Live at Blenheim, whatever they're doing. Those are the kind of sort of posts that I put in the ground to aim at, and I just kind of work in between those.
And the other bit of your world, this filming nonsense, what do you got planned, darling?
Well, as it's just you and I, careful for a big name drop here. I've just come off a week working on Edgar Wright's new movie, which is called The Running Man. It's a remake of the 1987 Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. Did a week on that. Now, the guy who's the lead of that is Glenn Powell, who's one of these guys who you've not heard of, and then suddenly he's come up. He was in Top Gun Maverick, he was in Twisters, he was in that last movie with Sydney Sweeney, whose name eludes me, but he's now the man. Everybody wants him, and Edgar Wright got him, along with a guy called Coleman Domingo, who's just been nominated for an Oscar for Best Actor for his portrayal of a prisoner in Sing Sing, which, to be honest, not my cup of tea, prison dramas, but I spent a week working with the guy, and a really nice guy. So that's coming out end of this year. They've got a really quick turnaround on that. And there's something that I filmed in a particular cinematic universe, which I can't say because I've signed an NDA a long time ago, far away. And that was filmed 2 years ago, and that's coming out in April. So I did a month's work on that. So you might be able to see me in there. And then we'll see what comes up. It's very much a short-term reactive thing. Somebody will say, are you available next week? Or are you available tomorrow? Or are you available in 10 days? It's kind of, well, yes, I am. And then you film it. And it might come out this year, or it might come out in 2 years' time, or it might not come out at all. I did a film called Shanghai many years ago and never seen it. It never got released in the UK, never got released in the US. I believe it got a Far East release, but I've never seen it.
Wow. Gary, do you ever have an aspiration to be, I mean, like to have a character in the films? Because whilst it's not sort of extras, is it? It's sort of a little bit more than that. But what do you ever sort of think, do you know what, I want this to be my career, and like get like TV series or, you know, that type of stuff?
I'm sure. I mean, every actor does that. I mean, a lot of the work that I do on some of the big films, it is what they call supporting artists. So we're the people in there who, if you took us away, it would make the scene look like two guys talking to themselves here. So we're the people who populate the background. But I do featured things. I've had dialogue on a couple of different ones. But it'd be really good to get a character that is mine that I could take through a number of different movies. The downside is I've got to that age now where words don't stick. So learning lines for me is really, really difficult. Little story. I did, what was it? Grantchester a couple of weeks ago. It's coming out next season, not this season. And I did an audition for it, and they sent me the sides, so the script, and it's only a couple of lines, but it had two names and a line of dialogue. I learned it, and I did the audition, and I got the part, learned it, and I got to the set, and they gave me the script, and they changed the names. They weren't completely different. They were very similar, but they were close enough to completely screw me up because I'd learnt these other names.
Because I sort of asked because I've always fancied having a go at something, but I wouldn't mind getting my teeth into something, you know, just it's just interesting. I might have to have a chat with you offline and see if there's an avenue for a middle-aged white bald man. I'm sure there's not very many of those around, so, you know. Anyway, so now then, we have a tradition on our little podcast, which we alluded to earlier with you and your 3D printed thing, and I think this has got some relevance to you, because did you ever do anything with Harry Potter? Did you ever do anything on the Harry Potter films?
I did, yes. I was a moving portrait in one of the Harry Potter movies.
I thought so. Look at that. I thought, dim in the back of my mind, I thought you had. Anyway, so something that you may recall from said Harry Potter films is the magic wand. Look at this. This is a special one because it's got a lightning bolt on it. Woo! So these are very Harry Potter-esque, these little magic wands. And somebody was kind enough to print us some of these 3D magic wands, a gentleman by the name of Benoit Laflamme. We were very grateful to him. But we take this opportunity to hand you the magic wand for you to take, and you get one whole wish. So here we go. There we go. It's coming. And you can grab that,
Thank
baby.
you.
And you now are the owner of the magic wand. What, Gary, would you love to make your wish and get for yourself, for the industry, for the world at large? How would you use your one wish?
This won't come as a surprise to people who've listened to a number of the episodes of my podcast, but I would love to see a spate of high visibility, widely spread public service announcements that talk about EVs, EV adoption, and which destroy a lot of the myths and the tropes, the anti-EV tropes that are out there. And again, as I said to Vicky Edmonds today, I will know that that's been successful when I can watch Coronation Street and on the middle commercial, the most expensive commercial on TV, there is a PSA for, look, your battery will not explode spontaneously. It will last more than 3 years, and it can be fully recycled. And I would love to see that on television. I'd love to see it on all social media. I'd love to see it in all the newspapers. Get the visibility out there. A lot of the work that you and I are doing, it's great. We're doing exactly that, but we don't have the reach. We're very much insular. We're within our own little EV bubble. And we need to get out of that, and we need to get onto mainstream TV. We need to get onto Netflix. We need to get onto Apple TV. We need to be putting those commercials out there. Public service announcement.
Good stuff. That's a good wish.
That could be your thing, Paul. That could be how you do it. You take a character like the Green Cross Code Man. You know?
Totally.
Could be you.
I don't think I've quite got the physique for the Green Cross Code Man. He was a big chap, wasn't he? You know, bit grr.
He was.
Yeah, Dave Prowse. He was also Darth Vader, wasn't he?
He was. Yeah.
And if you ever want a laugh, have a look at YouTube and try and find the original footage of him playing Darth Vader before they put James Earl Jones's voice on.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Because of course he's got the West Country accent like that, you know. No, Luke, I am your father.
Brilliant. John.
Yes, mate. What do you want?
Final thoughts.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, give me a cue, give me a hook, give me something to work with here.
So just letting everybody know,
episodes.
The secret that we have is private chat, and it's in the private chat. And you said thank you.
But yeah, I've had a sleep since then.
Short-term memory loss.
So, my final thoughts on Gary are the same as they have always been. I don't know what it is about Gary, but I love him. You're such a contradiction. You're such a highly intelligent, capable communicator who doesn't say much about you. It's all about everybody else. It's all about how you can inform and help and support and guide. You're there constantly as a friend, as a shoulder to cry on, as a lifter-upper of people. And I don't know anybody who's got a bad word to say about you, ever. You are just top drawer, my friend. Top man. Bless you.
I really appreciate that. And the one thing, you know, right back at you, you're kind of the polar opposite of me in that you're very, very open with your feelings. You're very, very open with everybody. And that's just not me. And I've got a lot of respect for people who can be like that, such as yourself.
I got a lot of respect for people who can bite their tongue and keep their business to themselves.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's it. Well, shall I just leave you two to it? Not
Paul,
offended at all.
You're part of this three-way, mate. You're not getting out that
easy. Brilliant.
Well, do you know what? So I think probably the thing I'm most jealous of when I think about Gary is amazing consistency.
His hair?
Well, yeah, that too. Just what a wonderful, consistent approach. And really true to yourself. Your podcasts are really good, very, very insightful. You're asking great questions all of the time. You get the right guests on. We get some great guests on. Don't get me wrong. Not to offend any of our previous guests, but you get some great guests on, and we've shared a lot of those similar guests. But they give value to the marketplace, and they inform and they educate in a way that is quite interesting to listen to as well. And I'm extremely jealous of the way that you've just embraced that childhood thing of going out and acting. And I wish that I had whatever it was that you took and to get out there and do that. And maybe one day we'll do it, because that's it. But you've always got a smile. You turn up every time, and I'm very, very happy and glad that I know you.
Like the proverbial bad penny, that's me, always turning up.
Yes. Oh, there's Gary. It's brilliant, and so we're very grateful. Thank you for taking the time to just give us a little bit of insight into the man Gary Comerford, and also to answer that question that gets up my nose all the time about charging. It's a good discussion to have, and one that we will no doubt see evolve over the coming months and years. Keep being who you are. Keep being a bit of a challenge to the marketplace to be honest and true, because if they're not, you're going to come with a question that says, just talk to me a little bit about, and then they're going to go, oh damn, I didn't expect that. So Gary, thank you for joining joining with us. There we go, joining with us today. And
I've really enjoyed this chat, guys. It's been fantastic, and I appreciate you inviting me on. Thanks.
He's the thinking pleasure. Man's EV expert, isn't he? He really is. He's really got like this. We're like, Cannon and Ball, Morecambe and Unwise, and he's just like Bamba Gascoigne sitting there just giving it all.
Absolutely.
Starter for 10, no conferring.
Absolutely. Well, Gary, thank you so much. And look, everybody, do connect with the EV Musings podcast and with Gary himself. I think you can find you on YouTube as well as the usual podcast, Spotify and Apple and all of those good places.
Wherever you get your podcasts, and YouTube, and I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on Blue Sky, and I'm on Instagram.
Oh, Blue Sky, showing off now. He's been on the new one. Which I think we're thinking about, aren't we? Anyway, so thank you, Gary, and connect with them. All those links will be in the chat, because collaboration is key. And just because it's another podcast, it doesn't mean to say that you can't spend some time listening to Gary and his great guests. But if you want to listen to some more of our guests and our nonsense, do head over to the EV Cafe website, and of course Spotify and Apple and all of those good things, where you can find more of the same from many of our guests. But in the meantime, let's all say thank you, Gary Comerford. What a gentleman you are, and look forward to the next time. Have a great day, everybody.